And a very warm welcome to the Bitcoin briefing. Today, Bitcoin is struggling to get above $50,000, although I do think it will breach it and stay above pretty soon. We obviously have gone through a bit of a correction over the last week, falling from $58,000 down to 43, and since then it's kind of been consolidating between the low 40s and the low 50s. We did edge above 50k briefly, but it did show some weakness. However, today I want to move away from the talk of price, and it's a bit of a slow news day too, and really discuss how I got into Bitcoin and the journey that I went through, and I think most Bitcoiners do the same. So when I first heard about Bitcoin, I was many years ago, probably with everyone else, it could be 8 or 9 years ago, and it just seemed to me like crazy internet money that would never work, a bit of a joke really, possibly a scam, certainly overvalued. For me, I couldn't realize how something that was digital could not be copied or couldn't be counterfeited. Like the games and the music industry forever have not been able to make their products piratable, and I couldn't figure out how you could have a money that somebody couldn't just copy and paste. And of course that very problem was the genius and the revolution that Satoshi had solved with Bitcoin. Now, that's not to say he was the first. Of course, there were a few other, beta versions of Bitcoin, but Satoshi really was the first one to solve that problem. And I think it was when, in 2017, Bitcoin had moved up from $2,000, and I was thinking about purchasing it. It moved up to $4,000, and at that point, I jumped in. I think the first Bitcoin I bought was half a Bitcoin for like about $2,000, and I kind of watched that go all the way up to $20,000 in late January, and really held on to that through the bear market. But I would have been a lot more financially successful and would have made a lot more had I just kept all of my funds in Bitcoin. You see, I think there is a journey that we all go through. First of all, you suddenly go from thinking Bitcoin is crazy internet money and is never going to work, a bit of a fad, and you kind of keep dismissing it despite it not going away, it going through bubble after bubble and still coming back stronger and stronger, and never really seeming to leave the mainstream consciousness. And yeah, when you first start to buy Bitcoin, you realize, holy shit, this really could work. This is free money. This is and not in the sense that you don't pay for it. This is free in the sense that everyone in the world has access to it. There's not a single person in the world that can block anybody else from using the Bitcoin network. It's completely uncontrolled by central banks, and really is the solution to the relentless money printing that is going on at the moment with all central banks, that is basically a tax by another name on savings, and makes it very difficult for the vast majority of people ever to be able to accumulate wealth and preserve that into the future. Now, I think when you kind of get that, everything changes. There's a paradigm shift almost, and you think, hang on a minute, this is better money. But then you start to learn some more, and you see all of these other new projects that maybe are faster or seem more scalable or have more privacy, for instance. And then you think, using this kind of paradigm where, or at least you're conceptualizing Bitcoin in a way like you would a company. Quite often many people say Bitcoin is the MySpace of cryptocurrencies, and it's going to inevitably be beaten by Facebook. But as I'll talk later, I think that's a fundamentally flawed point of view. Bitcoin is not a business or a company or anything like that. It is a technology, much in the way that the underlying technology that powers the internet is it's a protocol, or as Saifedean Ammous says in his Bitcoin Standard, Bitcoin is more like gunpowder. We don't have an option to not use it. If you don't use it, then ultimately you're going to be beaten by the countries that are using it. However, it took me years and years to realize this point, and I was distracted by many of the altcoin projects, much like definitely more than half of the market. People see that Bitcoin has had this huge run and think if they can buy these small cap tokens that they'll be able to have or enjoy as much of an upside as the early Bitcoin adopters have had. Now, sure, there are some good investments, I'm sure, in the altcoin market, and some of them do have a use case, but only some, and their use case is pretty limited, really. So for me, I invested first in the Bitcoin private fork, and that was disastrous. I'd lost maybe half a Bitcoin. In fact, I probably did lose the half a Bitcoin that I purchased with that. And then after that, I moved on to VeChain, thinking that kind of buying into this hype that we're going to be tokenizing everything and putting it on the blockchain, and it's going to revolutionize logistics. Of course, and then you realize after losing money and studying more and that what you were doing when you were buying many of these tokens is you are funding these companies' business models, but you don't have any equity in that company. You have a token that may or may not be useful in the future on that network, if that network even survives in a couple of years. But really, they're kind of like pseudo securities that you're purchasing. But you have none of the benefits of actually owning a security or owning an equity in that company. And I think one of the big traps that people fall into when they first come into the Bitcoin space is comparing these cryptocurrencies, which is a terrible name really, because many of them are not currencies or even trying to be currencies. And they're judging Bitcoin against these other projects. And Bitcoin is just money. It's plain and simple. It's just a store of value. It's a digital gold, and it can't really be compared on a like-for-like basis with Ethereum. Bitcoin is money, and Ethereum is a potential candidate for the next iteration of the internet, and Ether being the gas or the tokens that purchases the electricity to make that network work or to do anything on the network. Just like if you have, say, YouTube, it costs YouTube a lot of money to store all of the data on servers, and because it's centralizing, they're bearing all of those costs, and then they're recouping their investment later through advertisements. With a decentralized internet like Ethereum, you really do need to pay to play. If you want to use an app or something else, you have to pay the gas to transact on that network. So in that case, in that example, to compare Bitcoin with Ethereum, it just doesn't make sense at all. It's like comparing gold with Google. One is a hard asset, and the other one is a stake in a company. They're not to be compared. But anyway, I think that most people do. They get into this. Most people get into this same pattern. They dismiss Bitcoin. But yeah, I really think this is the pattern and the journey that almost all of us go through. First of all, you dismiss Bitcoin, and then you understand Bitcoin and you become a little bit obsessed with it. Then you learn more about the market, and you see that there are lots of brand new, shiny blockchain projects that really you claim that you like the tech, but it's the potential or the perceived upside that is really appealing, and your greed ends up costing you a lot of money until you have to go back to basics and you realize that all along Bitcoin is the whole game really, and 99.9% of these projects are merely devices or traps to separate you from your Bitcoin and swap what is an incredibly valuable asset for some token that some company has basically just minted and is selling to you so they can get your Bitcoin, or at the very least just fund their operations even more, without having to give you any future equities or shares or dividends or anything like that at all. And I think it takes years and years, even for extremely smart people, to kind of get it. And once you get it, well, then you're kicking yourself that you've spent years wasting money on trash and not doing what you should have been doing all along, which is accumulating Bitcoin, which kind of seemed boring or old at one point. And that really is to totally miss the point. And of course, some people are going to listen and some people aren't, but people need to make their own mistakes. I'm a firm believer that you don't really it's very, very difficult to be taught something. You need to learn from your own experiences and your own mess ups, really. So yeah, it took me 3 years to really understand why Bitcoin is so important. And I guess smarter and wiser and perhaps more mature investors will realize that earlier on. But it's something that everybody has to go through themselves. They probably all need to get their fingers burned on a few altcoins and realize that greedy toads often get, well, crushed. Well, I hope you enjoyed another episode of the Bitcoin Briefing. We'll have more talk and analysis and news and everything else about Bitcoin coming up tomorrow. Goodbye.
What the hell I'm trying to say? Cellophane will light the way. No more stupid alibis. Only ends up someone crying.